What's going on, family? This is Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. I'm very intrigued to discuss this fight with you that took place July 18th, 1987 at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas, Nevada, between Mike McCallum from Brooklyn, New York, and Donald Curry from Fort Worth, Texas. Now, I appreciated both fighters. I followed their careers. I knew Donald Curry and Mike McCallum. I didn't have a fighter that I wanted to win this fight, but I did understand Mike McCallum's situation. He was not actually treated fairly, to be honest with you, because R.I.P. to Emanuel Stewart. He wasn't honest with him when it came to Marvelous Marvin Hagler. Thomas Hearns got that fight in 1985, and it should have been Mike McCallum's fight. And from that point on, Mike McCallum was very bitter with Emanuel Stewart. As a matter of fact, he was bitter with everybody. He felt that he deserved to be in the big stage, and I believe he should have. So this fight took place July 18th, 1987. And just to give you somewhat of a background on Donald Curry, he was an outstanding fighter, had a very good amateur career. He fought from 1980 to 1991. Then he made a comeback in 1997. He would retire for good. He stood 5'9" and he had a 72-inch reach. He was born September 7th, 1961, and he was born in Fort Worth, Texas. Now, he stood 5'10" and he weighed 152 pounds. He had total bouts of 45, 34 wins, 25 knockouts, and 6 losses. Now, the thing is, he held the undisputed welterweight championship from 1985 to 1986, and he won and held the WBC Super Welterweight Championship from 1988 to 1989. And he was introduced into the Boxing Hall of Fame. I was at that introduction, got his autograph and photo, and spoke with him for a great period of time. Donald Curry had nearly over 400 fights, and that's incredible. That's incredible for a young man coming out of Fort Worth, Texas. But he did a great deal in his amateur career. Just to give you somewhat of a background on his amateur career, from 1977 to 1980, he won the National Junior Olympic Championships at 132 pounds. National AAU Championships, 139 pounds. The National AAU Championships on 147 pounds. The World Cup, 147 pounds. And the U.S. Olympic team trials. He didn't make those trials. Unfortunately for him, he was qualified, but because of the boycott in Moscow, he was unable to attend. And that's unfortunate, but he would make that up because a congressional team would give him, along with 450 other athletes, a medal, the gold medal. And I think that was justifiable. But I got some news for you. December 6, 1985, he knocked out Milt McCoy with a vicious, vicious punch. And Milt McCoy never saw that punch. It was a left hook, came out of nowhere. It was in Las Vegas, Nevada. I was at that fight. It was a second-round beauty. And he would be dropped, and then Donald Curry would come straight to Milt McCoy and hit him with a straight right hand. And down he went for the second time, and he was out. And that was a beautiful punch. Emanuel Stewart couldn't believe it because that was his pet peeve, along with Thomas Hearns. Milt McCoy was a very good fighter. He wound up having a younger brother who would train, and make sure that he tried his very best to make the Olympic team, and he did in 1984. But Steve McCoy was not the fighter that Milt McCoy was. Milt McCoy was a very good fighter. He was a welterweight champion, but he couldn't beat Donald Curry. And that was a very good fight that took place, second-round knockout, December 6, 1985 in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, Donald Curry would have 2 victories over the Moochie man, Marlon Starling. And that was very, very impressive to most people because Marlon Starling was always known as the real welterweight. Phenomenal fighter he was. He was a defensive wizard, knew his ring craftsmanship, and he wound up winning the WBA welterweight championship belt when he defeated Mark Breland. Mark Breland was a phenomenal amateur, only lost 1 fight, redeemed that fight, and then he would lose to Marlon Starling, and that would be his only loss at that time in 1987. But Marlon Starling was some fighter, and he lost twice to Donald Curry. I was at both of those fights, as a matter of fact, as well. Now, Donald Curry would lose his titles to the Ragamuffin Man. Unfortunately for him, September 27th, 1986, he would lose the WBC, the IBF, the WBA, the ring and the lineal belts to the Ragamuffin Man, Lloyd Honican. Lloyd Honican was a phenomenal fighter, and he showed it in that ring. And what had happened, Donald Curry clashed heads with Lloyd Honican. It was the 6th round. And he kind of quit on a stool. He decided he didn't want to come back out for more action. It was scheduled for 12 rounds. And Donald Curry's career was questioned at that time. His heart was a little questioned. And the next man I'm going to tell you that he fought next really started heckling him. And that's how he got that fight. with Donald Curry. And his name is Mike McCallum. But before that fight, Donald Curry would move up in weight to 156 division, February 7th, 1987. And he would face Tony Montgomery. It would wind up being a 15-round disqualification. A 5th-round disqualification at Caesars Palace, Las Vegas, Nevada. I was at that fight. And it seemed like Tony Montgomery wound up headbutting him. And he was doing the same thing that happened to Donald Curry when he faced Lloyd Honican. Although Donald Curry was the one that initiated the headbutt, but Tony Montgomery was headbutting Donald Curry. And it got to a point where he was disqualified, and Donald Curry would go after Tony Montgomery, and he would hit him while the referee was talking to him. He would snuff him in the back of the face. And that was it for Tony Montgomery. That was amazing. But July 18th, 1987, Caesars Palace, Las Vegas, Nevada, and he was knocked out by Mike McCallum, the body snatcher. Mike McCallum was one of the greatest fighters of all time, in my opinion. He had one of the greatest amateur records. 1976, he was on the Jamaican team. He did everything in amateur boxing that can be done outside of Pernell Whitaker. Phenomenal amateur fighter was Mike McCallum. And Mike McCallum was furious after the fight because he felt unjust, and he went over, he saw Emanuel Stewart, and he started heckling him. And he let Emanuel Stewart know, "I told you that I was the man." And, you know, it put Mike McCallum in a different stratosphere at that point. But I remember Mike McCallum in Gleason's gym. He used to do a lot of body work on a heavy bag, and they called him the body snatcher. Phenomenal fighter was Mike McCallum. And Mike McCallum, to me, is one of the greatest welterweights, junior middleweights, and middleweights of all time. So I just wanted to relive that fight with you right here on the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuffs series. I'm Scrapbook Boxing. Thanks for hanging in there with me. Salute to my subscribers, and salute to Donald Curry and Mike McCallum. The body snatcher, Mike McCallum, was a phenomenal fighter, and Donald the Cobra Curry was also a phenomenal fighter. Would have loved to see how they would do today. They would have been doing very well as far as I'm concerned. Salute.